Most of us have been lying to ourselves about how reality actually works for our entire lives. We have spent centuries, maybe millennia, believing that the only way to make things happen is through force, through sheer willpower, and through absolute command. We tell ourselves that if we just want something badly enough, if we focus hard enough, or if we scream the right orders at the universe, reality will eventually kneel down and obey us. It is the history of human conflict, the history of management, and the history of how we treat our own brains. But here is the thing that nobody talks about. Over the last 100 years, while we were busy trying to force the world to bend to our will, a completely different truth quietly emerged. Across biology, neuroscience, economics, and even artificial intelligence, we discovered something that completely breaks the old model of control. We found out that most systems do not change because they are commanded to change. They change because they learn. And that simple shift in perspective might be the most important thing you ever hear, because it changes everything about how you heal, how you grow, and how you actually participate in your own future. Let's break this down because it sounds abstract, but it is actually incredibly practical. We need to ask a really simple question. What is a learning system? A learning system is just anything that changes its future behavior based on the consequences of what it did in the past. That is it. Your brain is a learning system. Your immune system is a learning system. The stock market, a forest, a corporation, and an AI chatbot are all learning systems. And in every single one of these examples, learning happens the exact same way. It is a loop. Action produces an outcome. That outcome produces feedback, and that feedback updates the system. Notice what is missing from that list. There is no command. There is no boss shouting orders. The system does not need to be told what to become. It becomes something new because it experiences the consequences of what it has already been. Think about a baby learning to walk. You cannot explain gravity to a toddler. You cannot give them a manual on muscle contraction. They stand up, they fall down, they feel the floor, and their brain updates. Action, outcome, feedback. This is how neural networks learn to recognize faces. This is how your white blood cells learn to fight a virus. And it reveals that most change in the universe does not come from force. It comes from feedback. Now, this is where it gets really interesting and honestly, a little bit scary. In simple systems like a car engine or a light switch, control works great. You flip the switch, the light turns on. You turn the wheel, the car turns. But in complex systems, which include your life, your relationships, society, and nature, control almost always makes things worse. When systems become adaptive and interconnected, forcing them produces instability. It produces fragility. We have all seen this. Overmanaged ecosystems collapse because they lose their natural balance. Overplanned economies stagnate because they cannot adapt to real needs. Over-controlled organizations become brittle and bureaucratic. And maybe most relatable of all, over-directed nervous systems develop anxiety. There is actually a principle in systems science about this. It says that the more complex a system becomes, the less it tolerates being controlled. Why? Because control removes feedback, and when feedback disappears, learning stops. At a certain level of complexity, the highest form of influence isn't command. It is shaping the conditions under which the system controls itself. This leads us to one of the wildest discoveries in modern learning theory. Learning systems are almost never taught by instruction. They are trained by bias. When engineers train an artificial intelligence, they usually don't tell the system exactly what to do step by step. That would be impossible. Instead, they change the rewards it receives. They change the constraints it operates under. They change the environment it explores. And then, they let the system discover its own strategy. Instead of saying, do this specific thing, they say, let's make this specific outcome easier to discover. This is called reward shaping or constraint shaping. And it works astonishingly well. The system ends up learning things its designers never even imagined. This suggests something incredibly powerful for us as humans. The most effective way to shape the future is not to command it, but to bias the conditions under which it learns how to become. There is one final principle here that changes the game completely. It is called emergence. In complex systems, the most important abilities do not exist in the parts at all. Think about your brain. No single neuron knows how to think. No single cell knows how to heal a body. No single ant knows how to build a colony. Intelligence appears only at the system level. New abilities arise that no part of the system contains on its own. Here is the crucial implication for your life. If you try to micromanage a system, if you try to control every tiny detail, you prevent it from discovering abilities you cannot even imagine. Because those abilities do not exist yet, they can only appear when the system is allowed to explore its own possibilities. If you are constantly forcing the outcome, you are blocking the emergence of something better than what you could have planned. So, when we put all of this together, a new picture starts to form. Reality does not primarily change through force. It changes through learning, through feedback, through exploration, and through emergence. This suggests a totally different approach to agency and power. Instead of asking, how do I make this happen? We might ask, how do I shape the conditions so that better futures become easier to learn? Instead of asking, how do I control this system? We might ask, how do I bias this system toward coherence and growth? And then withdraw so it can do its work. Instead of forcing outcomes, we train environments. We shape probability landscapes. We participate in becoming. This perspective is not just science. It is where science meets something that looks a lot like magic. And I don't mean stage magic, I mean the old traditions. If you look at how magic has been described for thousands of years, it is often called intention made active. A spell, a visualization, a declaration. But if reality is a learning system, then intention does not function as a command. It functions as a bias. A spell does not say this must happen. It quietly says, let this path become more available. Let this attractor become stronger. Let this future become easier to find. In that sense, magic is not an act of domination. It is an act of invitation. You are not forcing reality to obey you. You are rearranging the conditions so that when reality explores its own possibilities, the future you desire lies closer at hand. This explains something that intuitive people have known forever. The most powerful workings are rarely the most aggressive ones. They are the ones that soften resistance, remove obstacles, clarify intention, and then release. That release is the most important part, because when the supervision withdraws, the system is finally free to learn. It is free to discover capacities the magician could never design. It is free to arrive at outcomes that are not only desired, but wiser than the intention itself. In this grammar of becoming, the ancient instruction to let go after setting an intention is not just mystical advice. It is good learning theory. It is the art of shaping probability. It is the art of training futures by arranging conditions and then stepping back so that becoming itself can finish the work. This does something very important for your whole system. It honors the mystery without inflating it. It aligns the idea of spellcraft or manifestation with hard science. It makes the idea of surrendering technically meaningful. It reframes surrender not as weakness, but as a high-level skill. And most beautifully, it shows that what people have been trying to do for centuries was never really about power over others or power over the world. It was about understanding when to influence and when to let an intelligence larger than your own will discover the future on its own. If that question interests you, then you are already standing inside one of the most important shifts of our time. It is not a new belief system you have to sign up for. It is not a new doctrine you have to memorize. It is just a new grammar. A grammar for how learning systems become futures. and perhaps a new way of understanding how we ourselves are becoming right now. We have spent so long thinking we are the architects who have to build every brick of our lives with sweat and force. But maybe we are more like gardeners. We prepare the soil, we ensure the nutrients are there, we remove the weeds that block the light, we water the ground, but we do not reach into the seed and pull the plant out with pliers. We do not command the flower to bloom. We bias the environment toward growth, and we let the system do what it has learned to do over billions of years. This is an invitation to stop exhausting yourself with the illusion of control. It is an invitation to look at your life, your business, your art, and your relationships as living, learning entities. When things aren't going the way you want, don't ask where you need to apply more force. Ask what feedback loop is missing. Ask what constraints are shaping the wrong behavior. Ask how you can bias the conditions so that the outcome you want becomes the path of least resistance. We are moving from an age of command to an age of cultivation, from an age of force to an age of feedback. It is a quieter way to live, but it is infinitely more powerful. Because when you stop trying to force the river to flow uphill, you can finally learn how to navigate the current. You can stop fighting reality and start participating in it. And that is where the real magic happens. Not in the clenching of the fist, but in the opening of the hand.